everybody, and welcome to the next edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today, I want to talk about a new round that apparently has tickled everybody's taint inside the gun community. If you base it on how many people are asking me questions about this, a lot of people are very excited. It's what a lot of people have been talking about in our live chats, sending me emails, etc. The round is, of course, the 30 Super Carry from Federal. It's a brand new round coming out. There's going to be new guns chambered in it. It's got some pretty impressive ballistics, apparently. And a lot of people are even going as far as to say, this is going to revolutionize the gun market. It's going to replace 9mm. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'll address that in this video. But what I want to do with this round tonight, because I've never shot it. I don't think most of anybody out there has shot it. So I'm going to have to go by their marketing and their interviews and their reviews and their promotionals they've done. So we're going to go by their numbers and we're going to look at it and we're going to say, is this round revolutionary and is it going to make 9mm obsolete or something in between? So let's look at the advantages it's supposed to have. There's 3 advantages it's supposed to have. It's supposed to have more capacity. Since it is a narrower round, it's about the same length as a 9mm cartridge, but it's narrower. So in the same gun you can get 10 9mm in, you can get 12 of these rounds in. 12 30 supers. So it's supposed to have the advantage of capacity. It's also supposed to have the advantage of expansion. It's supposed to expand as well as 9mm, even though it's a smaller round. That's a little misleading in the advertising. We'll talk about that when we get to it. And the other advantage it's supposed to have is it's lighter recoiling. So therefore it's easier to control. And that is true, but kind of misleading in the way they're advertising it. We'll talk about that too when we get to that advantage. First, let's talk about the advantage of capacity. Well, just having more of something doesn't mean it's better. If I've got 4 quarters in this hand and 8 nickels in this hand, well, the 4 quarters is still better than the 8 nickels. Unless you're looking to throw nickels at somebody. But usually I would take the 4 quarters. So is 10 less than 12 in every circumstance? Well, in this circumstance, well, the ballistics would have to be very similar for me, for it to matter just 2 more rounds, 20% more ammo. Would have to be very close. And in this case, they're reporting that their 2 grain levels of ammo they have 2 grains available. That is 100 grain and 115 grain. They're claiming the 100 grain ammo makes, and I'm estimating here, like between 330 and 350 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, which is not anything too shabby. That kind of falls between 9mm and 380 like they advertise this round does. Although they advertise it like that, but then they go on to talk about it like that's not really the case later. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So let's say the 100 grains, like I said, get between 330 and 350 like they say. That's pretty good. The 115 grain bullet gets 338 foot-pounds of energy. It's a little heavier. So moves a little slower. I personally don't like to use rounds less than 115 grains. It's just my preference. So if you're someone who has the same preference like me, you're going to only have one option on this, and it's about 338, 340 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Now, how does that compare to 9mm? Is it similar? I'm not going to say it's similar. 115 grain 9mm, you can get them 500 foot-pounds plus at the muzzle. That's quite a bit more. Even the ammo I get from Minuteman, which is loaded semi-hot so that it's good enough to carry, but still inexpensive enough to train with, it gets about 420 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle from a 115 grain bullet, a hollow point. So I wouldn't actually say that they're comparable. In fact, I would say pretty much across the board, you average out that the 30 Super Carry has about 65% as much power as 9mm on average. Is that enough to make it worth having 2 more rounds of it to have the less powerful round? Not to me. To me, it's kind of like the 327 Federal. You know, everyone's like, instead of getting 5 rounds of a 357 Magnum, you can get 6 rounds of 327 Federal. But 327 Federal ballistically is closer to 9mm than it is 357 Magnum. I would much rather have 5 357 Magnums than I would 6 9mm. In fact, if I had a single stack pistol that held 8 9mm and a revolver that held 6 357 Magnum, I'm taking the 6 357 Magnum. In this case, less is more, in my opinion. I would rather have 6 of a round that I know is going to do 100% of the job I need it to do than I would have 10 of a round that do half the job. I don't want something. I want something I know is going to penetrate well rather than something that's going to penetrate okay. Because having the more rounds, if you've got less penetration and that penetration ends up not being sufficient, like you're shooting at a hog or something, well, unless you're good enough that you can hit the last bullet with the new bullet and push it a little further in each time, every round is kind of ineffective, and you're going to have to wait for them to bleed out slowly. So it doesn't really look to me like capacity is a big advantage here because you're giving up a lot of power. So I really don't see the capacity of this round as a huge advantage, but some might differ from my opinion. So I can see where some might think that. Now let's look at the expansion. This is where I thought they were being a little dishonest because the way they wrote it and the way it sounded, you could almost walk away or easily walk away from reading the reviews, the promotionals, etc., thinking, wow, it starts off smaller, but by the time it's expanded and the 9mm expanded, they're the same size. But that's not what it really is. They're saying that it expands almost as much as 9mm. It on average expands 1.9 times its size when it hits medium. 9mm on average expands 1.91 times its size, which is technically a little more, but saying that's more would be splitting hairs. So they're about the same. So that's right, it's true. They're about the same as far as expansion is concerned, relatively. But if you look at which one's bigger, the 9mm expands to a larger projectile because it starts off bigger, ends up bigger. The 30 Super Carry starts out smaller, ends up smaller, even though it expanded the same percentage. So it still ends up being smaller. I think a lot of people are thinking, wow, it expands better, so therefore it's the same size at the end. It isn't. So if you were thinking that, that's a mistake. I understand why you think that, the way they worded some things, but I just don't see that as an advantage. It just means it's good. 9mm is good. Both of them are good at expanding. Very similarly good at expanding. So it's not an advantage. It's just basically a match. And since it starts off smaller, it doesn't have any advantage. It may be a disadvantage, actually. Because the more space you cover, the more likely you are to hit something vital. So 9mm still has the advantage there. Now let's look at recoil. They say recoil's an advantage. It's a smaller recoil. It's got less recoil. Well, of course it does. It's less powerful. 38 Special has less recoil than 357 Magnum. 327 Federal Magnum has less recoil than 357 Magnum. Less powerful round. So that's a given. But is that an advantage? Well, I guess it is if you're recoil sensitive and they make bigger guns in this lesser round. That's where it is going to have a big advantage, I think. If you have a gun like a Beretta Cheetah that used to be 380, well, you can put this round in it, and it's more powerful, but still has less recoil than a 9mm. So you've got a gun that's better than a 380, but it's not as good as a 9mm. But that's a little niche being filled there. The only thing I don't like about some of the things they say in their advertising, it kind of leads you away from thinking, oh, it fills that little niche. Recoil-sensitive people can get a gun that's not as powerful as a 9mm, but more powerful than 380, because they go on to say that because of the 30 Super and a lot of the advertising and a lot of the reviews, they can make the guns smaller and lighter and still have the same muzzle energy. Well, that's not true. You're not going to have the same muzzle energy unless that smaller, lighter gun's in 9mm. Because if it's in 30 Super Carry, it's going to have less muzzle energy, about 65%. We already determined that. So I don't see that is really honest advertising, because if you're saying you're going to make the gun smaller and lighter and blah, 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 well, then you're going to get more recoil if you make the gun smaller and lighter. So that's really going to negate the whole recoil advantage if you do that. You're also going to negate the capacity advantage if you make smaller, lighter guns. So when they brought smaller, lighter guns into it with the same muzzle energy, I was upset a little bit because I'm like, no, it's not going to have the same muzzle energy. And if you make smaller, lighter guns, you just negated the capacity and the recoil argument. So I don't know why they brought that into the advertising. I think this should have just been advertised as a middle ground round between 380 and 9mm. Can't handle 9mm, which I think most of us can handle 9mm. 9mm is not even my go-to round because, I'm a man, damn it. I don't know why I have to keep people telling people that. But it seems like I have to remind people that, like every other day, that I have male genitalia. For some reason, it just doesn't stick with people. Or they don't believe me, I don't know what. But I am a man. 357 is my go-to. But, I think most people can handle 9mm. If you can't, well, great. If you want a smaller, lighter gun, that's where I think this round's going to shine. Like you say, I love PPKs, but I don't like 380. Well, they can start making guns like a PPK in this, and it's better than 380. Instead of getting that 250 to 280 foot-pounds of energy, you can get up to 360, 350. That's a lot better. It's not going to be 9mm, but it's still better. Beretta Cheetah, same thing. And you can get more rounds in it. If you start converting 380 ACP guns to 30 Super Carry, you can get more rounds in them, and you can get lower recoil, but than 9mm, more recoil than a 380, but still have a gun that's manageable, can be easily controlled, but is a little more powerful than the 380. So a lot of people who felt 380 was the minimum, because that's what you can get, 380, 9mm is too much for them, well then this would be a little step up that they could handle. A lot for women, etc. This might be a woman's round, might come in pink boxes. Might be a good thing for it. But at the end of the day, is it going to replace 9mm? No, it is not equal to 9mm. What I think it's going to be good at, like I said, is filling that gap, like they say originally in their advertising, between 380 and 9mm. All that other stuff they go into, like same muzzle energy, smaller, lighter guns, etc., that kind of just defeats their argument. They should just stick to it'll fill that gap between 380 and 9mm, because I think it's going to do that very well, and I love to see some 380 guns chambered in it. But as far as turning 9mm guns into the 30 super guns, I don't want to give up the power just for a couple more rounds. So for me, it wouldn't be worth it for that. All right, everybody, I really went over on time, so I'm just going to thank everybody for coming today. Hope I see you again tomorrow. Until then, I just want to remind everyone to always carry and stay safe until I see you again.